It's okay.
The first thing Amara heard was a sound. A child crying, small, terrified. The kind of sound that bypassed rational thought and grabbed something primal in her chest. Amara moved toward the sound before her brain could stop her. Around the corner of a dumpster, she found him. A boy, maybe 6 years old. Dark hair plastered to his forehead by rain. School uniform soaked through. His eyes were the size of moons. Tears mixing with rain on his round cheeks. He was speaking Korean too fast for her to follow, but she understood fear in any language. She crouched down, making herself smaller, less threatening. "It's okay," she said in her limited Korean, hands raised, palms open. "You're safe." The boy lunged for her, wrapping small arms around her neck with desperate strength. She caught him instinctively, her mind racing. Where were his parents? Why was he alone in an alley at 9 o'clock at night? She was trying to decide whether to call the police when she felt the air change. Men emerged from the shadows like they'd been formed from darkness itself. 3 of them, maybe more behind. They wore suits that were too nice, moved with coordination that was too practiced. One of them spoke in Korean, fast, aggressive. The boy's grip tightened around her neck. Amara stood slowly, keeping the child behind her, between her body and the wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't understand," she said in English, then tried her broken Korean. "I don't speak Korean well." "Help." The men exchanged glances. One of them, the one who'd spoken, stepped forward. His hand moved inside his jacket. Time fractured into slow-motion frames. The glint of metal. The boy's scream. Her body moving before thought could catch up. The impact as she threw herself between the child and the blade. The burn of steel cutting through cloth and skin. The warm rush of blood down her arm. She wrapped herself around the boy, making her body a shield, feeling him shake against her as she pressed him into the corner. Everything went very still, then the world exploded. Gunshots cracked through the alley like thunder. More men poured in from both ends. Shouts in Korean. The sound of bodies hitting pavement. Amara stayed curled around the boy, her shoulder screaming, blood soaking through her jacket. She pressed her hand against the wound and prayed. When the shooting stopped, the silence was worse. Footsteps approached, slow, measured, confident. Amara looked up. The man standing over her made the air feel thinner, tall. Broad shoulders in a perfectly cut black suit, face carved from the kind of beauty that felt dangerous. Sharp jaw and high cheekbones and eyes so dark they looked black. His hair was styled with careless precision, one strand falling across his forehead. He looked young, maybe 30, but he moved like someone who'd seen centuries of violence. He was looking at her, really looking. Not through her the way most people did, not past her, but at her, into her. Like he was reading every secret she'd ever kept written across her skin. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, the kind of control that came from restraining something violent underneath. In Korean, she shook her head. English? He switched languages with barely an accent, the kind of English that came from expensive schools and international business. You're hurt, not a question. The observation of someone cataloging damage. The boy, she managed, her voice thin with pain and adrenaline. Is he safe? The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been surprise or recognition or the beginning of an obsession he didn't understand yet. He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level. His presence was overwhelming this close, the scent of expensive cologne and gunpowder and rain. You protected my son. Again, not a question. Your son. The words came out breathless as pieces clicked together. The expensive car, the coordinated attack, the way everyone in the alley had fallen silent when he arrived. The boy's small hand clutched her shirt tighter. She felt him trembling. You need a hospital, the man said, standing. He pulled out a phone, speaking rapid Korean that was too fast for her to follow. Amara tried to stand. Her legs gave out. Strong hands caught her before she hit the pavement. He lifted her like she weighed nothing. One arm under her knees, the other supporting her back. She should have protested, should have insisted she could walk. But the world was tilting, her vision graying at the edges, blood loss and shock finally catching up. I have you. He said it quietly, just for her, and something in his voice made her believe him. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was his face. Those impossibly dark eyes watching her like she was something precious he'd just found and would kill to keep.
The next morning arrived with white light and the smell of antiseptic. Amara woke in stages, awareness returning in fragments, soft sheets, the steady beep of monitors, pain in her shoulder that had been dulled to a manageable ache. She opened her eyes to find herself in a private hospital room that was bigger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Seoul's skyline, the morning sun turning the city gold. Everything in the room was cream and pale wood and quiet luxury. This was not a public hospital. A woman in nursing scrubs noticed her stirring. She smiled, pressed a button, spoke quickly in Korean. Within minutes, a doctor arrived. He explained in careful English that she'd been lucky. The knife had missed anything vital, 12 stitches, some muscle damage. She'd need to keep the arm immobilized for a week, full recovery in 6 to 8 weeks. "Who brought me here?" Amara asked. The doctor's expression became carefully neutral. "Mr. Kang requested we provide the best care." She asked for specifics. He gave none, just assured her that all expenses were covered and she should rest. Later that afternoon, he came. Amara heard him before she saw him, a quiet knock followed by the door opening. He filled the doorway for a moment, then entered with the kind of presence that made the large room feel smaller. He wore a different suit, charcoal gray, white shirt, no tie. He looked like he'd walked off the pages of a magazine, except magazines didn't capture the way he moved, the controlled grace of a predator trying to remember how to be human. "You're awake." He said it in English, his accent doing interesting things to the words. "How do you feel?" "Like I got stabbed." She said it before thinking, then winced at her own bluntness. "Sorry. Thank you. For bringing me here. For saving the boy. You saved him." He moved closer to the bed, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "I merely arrived in time to clean up the aftermath." "Your son, is he okay?" "Yes. Thanks to you." He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "He wouldn't let go of me until I promised you were safe. I made that promise. Now I'm here to keep it." Amara studied him. In daylight, he was impossibly beautiful in a way that made her stomach flutter and her instincts scream warnings. Men who looked like that didn't just show up in hospital rooms to check on strangers. Men who had armed guards and expensive suits and children targeted by knife-wielding attackers didn't operate in worlds where random women from California got to walk away clean. "I should introduce myself properly," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "Kang Min-ho. Some people call me other things, but you can call me Min-ho. Amara Wells." She hesitated. "I don't understand what happened last night. The boy, the men with knives, the shooting. What did I walk into?" His expression remained neutral, but she saw the calculation behind his eyes. He was deciding how much truth to give her. "My world is complicated," he said finally, "and now you're part of it." "That's not an answer." "No, it's protection." He leaned back in the chair, still watching her with that unnerving intensity. "The men who attacked you last night were trying to hurt me through my son. They failed because you intervened. Now they know your face. Your name will be easy enough to find. And in my world, Miss Wells, witnesses don't live long." Her mouth went dry. "Are you threatening me? I'm explaining your reality." He said it gently, but there was steel underneath. "You have two choices. You can go back to your life and hope they don't find you, or you can let me protect you." "What does protection look like?" "It looks like me." His voice dropped lower, became something intimate and dangerous. "It looks like security that follows you everywhere. A new apartment in a building I own, a job at one of my companies. It looks like becoming visible to my enemies so they know that touching you means war." He paused. "It looks like accepting that your life changed the moment you chose to save a stranger's child." "I didn't know he was your son. Does that matter? You still threw yourself between him and a knife. That kind of courage is rare, worth protecting, worth keeping." The way he said the last part made heat crawl up her spine. Amara forced herself to think through the fear and the lingering adrenaline. She was in Korea on a student visa that was technically expired. She worked 2 jobs that barely covered rent in a tiny apartment she shared with 3 other women. She'd come to Seoul chasing a dream of teaching English and experiencing a new culture, and instead found herself trapped in casual racism and financial instability. She'd been planning to go home, to admit defeat, to crawl back to California with nothing to show for her year abroad except debt and disappointment. "You don't have to decide now." Minho stood, smoothing his jacket. "But decide soon. My enemies move quickly." He pulled out a business card, set it on the table beside her bed. "Call me when you're ready. I'll send a car." She watched him walk to the door. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why do you care what happens to me?" He stopped, turned. The look on his face was impossible to read. Layers of control hiding something deeper. "Because my son won't stop asking about the woman who saved him. Because you didn't hesitate when most people would have run. Because—" He moved back to the bed, close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes, dark brown with flecks of gold. "You looked at me last night like you knew exactly what I was and chose courage anyway. That interests me." Before she could respond, he was gone, taking all the air in the room with him. A few days later, Amara was discharged with pain medication and strict instructions to rest. She took a taxi back to her apartment, her mind spinning. The other women she lived with had questions about where she'd been. She gave vague answers about an accident, showed her bandaged shoulder, deflected their concern. That night, she lay in her narrow bed and tried to make sense of what had happened. She should go back to the States, should put an ocean between herself and whatever complicated, dangerous world she'd stumbled into. Should forget the way Min-ho had looked at her like she was something he'd been searching for without knowing he was searching. The next morning, 3 men in suits knocked on her door. They spoke minimal English, but their meaning was clear. They were there to take her to Mr. Kang. Amara went, partly because she was curious, partly because saying no to men who worked for someone like Min-ho felt like a good way to end up disappeared. Mostly because she couldn't stop thinking about him. The car took her to an office building in Gangnam, all glass and steel, and the kind of understated wealth that announced itself through silence rather than noise. They led her to the top floor, to an office with windows overlooking the entire city. Min-ho was on the phone when she entered, speaking rapid Korean. He held up one finger, a universal gesture for wait. She waited, taking in the office. Minimal furniture, expensive art, books in Korean and English, a photograph on the desk of the boy from the alley, smiling at the camera with the kind of joy that made her chest ache. Min-ho ended his call, looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, became softer at the edges while remaining essentially predatory. "You came. I wasn't sure you would. You sent 3 men to collect me. That doesn't leave much room for refusing. If you'd refused, they would have left." He stood, came around the desk. "I don't force women into anything. I strongly encourage, but I don't force. What am I doing here? Making a choice." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit. We need to talk about your future." Amara sat. Her shoulder ached. The pain medication was wearing off. She felt off balance, like she was negotiating a contract she didn't understand with stakes she couldn't see. "I've made some arrangements," Min-ho said, settling back into his chair with the casual grace of someone completely comfortable with power. "A security team assigned to you, an apartment in a building I own, much nicer than your current situation. A position at my company's international division, your English skills and American perspective would be valuable." He slid a folder across the desk. "Everything is outlined here. Salary, benefits, housing specifications, security protocols." She opened the folder. The numbers made her breath catch. "This is too much. For what I did. You risked your life for my son. There is no amount too much for that." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "But I won't lie to you, Miss Wells. This arrangement serves me as well. Having you visible, under my protection, sends a message to my enemies. It shows strength, shows that I reward loyalty and courage, shows that I take care of what's mine. I'm not yours." His smile was slow, dangerous, the kind of smile that promised things she shouldn't want. "Not yet." The 2 words hung between them like a challenge. Amara should have been offended, should have thrown the folder back at him and walked out, should have put him in his place for assuming she was something to be claimed. Instead, she felt heat curl low in her belly, felt her heartbeat accelerate, felt something wake up inside her that had been sleeping since she'd arrived in Korea alone and broke and increasingly desperate. The following morning, she moved into her new apartment. The security team appeared with her belongings before she'd even said yes, which should have annoyed her but mostly impressed her with their efficiency. The apartment was on the 20th floor of a high-rise in Yeouido, with views of the Han River and twice the space of anywhere she'd lived in her entire life. It came fully furnished in soft grays and creams, modern Korean minimalism that felt both expensive and comfortable. One of the security team, a man named Jae-sung who spoke decent English, explained the protocols. They would be nearby at all times, Not invasive, but present. The building itself was secure. The job would start next week, giving her time to recover. Everything was arranged. Everything was handled. Everything felt like a gilded cage she'd walked into with her eyes open. That evening, Minho came to check on her. He stood in her living room, hands in his pockets, looking at the space with an expression she couldn't read. "Do you like it? It's beautiful," she said honestly. "More than I need. You need more than you think." He moved to the windows, looked out at the river. "You've been living small, Miss Wells, making yourself invisible. I've seen your file. 3 jobs, expired visa, an apartment where you slept on a mattress on the floor. That's survival, not living. You had me investigated." "Of course." His tone suggested this was obvious. "I protect what interests me, and you interest me. Why?" She moved closer, emboldened by the medication and the surreal nature of her entire situation. "What is it about me that interests you so much? You stepped between a knife and a child you didn't know." He turned to face her. Most people in that situation would have run, would have called the police from a distance, would have done anything except throw their own body in the way. But you didn't even hesitate. That kind of instinct can't be taught. It's who you are at your core. He moved closer. "And I want to understand who you are." She should step back, should maintain distance, should remember that this man was dangerous in ways she didn't fully understand yet. Instead, she stood her ground. "Your son," she said, changing the subject because his proximity was doing things to her ability to think clearly. "Where is he? Safe? With his mother?" Minho's expression went carefully neutral. "We're not together anymore. Haven't been for years. But we co-parent. She has him during the week. I have him on weekends. That night was my night. He was supposed to be at my apartment. Instead, he snuck out to meet me at my office because he missed me. He put himself in danger because he's 6 and doesn't understand that missing someone isn't worth dying for." The pain in his voice was carefully controlled but still audible. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't moved fast enough, I would have lost him. And I don't lose what I love." The intensity in his eyes when he said that last part made her breath catch. They stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the exact texture of his skin, count his eyelashes if she wanted to be that weird about it. She felt magnetized, drawn forward by something that felt bigger than choice. "You should rest," Minho said, his voice lower, rougher. "Your shoulder needs time to heal." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Thank you. For earlier, for moving in, for giving me a chance to protect you the way you protected him. I'll see you tomorrow." He left before she could ask what tomorrow meant. The next day brought flowers. Dozens of roses in deep red, delivered by a man in a suit who bowed and left without waiting for a tip. The card was simple. Minho's name written in strong, confident strokes. No message, just his name, like he didn't need to explain, like the flowers themselves were explanation enough. Later that week, she started her new job. The office was a floor below Minho's, open and modern with glass walls and the kind of collaborative space that felt like it belonged in a tech startup rather than whatever complicated international business empire he ran. Her coworkers were friendly but careful. They treated her with a deference that made her uncomfortable until she realized they thought she was connected to Minho in ways that went beyond employer and employee. The rumors were already spreading. She was his mistress, his girlfriend, someone important enough to warrant the kind of security detail that followed her everywhere. She tried to correct these assumptions, gave up when she realized no one believed her. By the end of the second week, she'd settled into a routine that felt almost normal: work during the day, Korean language lessons in the evening with a tutor Minho had arranged, quiet nights in her beautiful apartment that still felt too big, too empty, too much like a stage set for a life she wasn't sure how to live. Minho came to check on her most evenings, sometimes briefly, just a knock on the door and a few minutes of conversation, sometimes longer, staying for dinner that she'd cooked or ordered, sitting across from her at the dining table like they were friends, like this was normal, like he wasn't the most dangerous man she'd ever met. They talked about small things, her adjustment to Seoul, his son's latest obsession with dinosaurs, the challenges of running an international business, her dreams of teaching that had brought her to Korea in the first place. He listened when she talked, really listened, with the kind of attention that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. She found herself looking forward to his visits, found herself disappointed on evenings when he didn't come, found herself thinking about him constantly, wondering what he was doing, whether he was safe, whether he thought about her the way she was beginning to think about him. The jealousy started small. A woman at a company function who touched Minho's arm too familiarly, who laughed too loud at his jokes, who looked at him like he was something she wanted to consume. Amara felt heat crawl up her spine, felt her hands clench, felt something possessive and territorial rise up inside her that she had no right to feel. She told herself she was being ridiculous. Minho wasn't hers. They weren't together. He'd hired her, protected her, visited her. That was all. The woman's name was Sujin. She worked in the legal department. She was beautiful in that particularly Korean way, delicate features and perfect skin, and the kind of style that looked effortless, but probably required hours of maintenance. She was standing too close to Minho at the networking event, touching him, smiling up at him, and he was letting her. Amara excused herself, went to the bathroom, stared at herself in the mirror, and tried to understand the feeling clawing at her chest. When she emerged, Minho was waiting in the hallway. "You left." He said it like an accusation. "I needed air." His eyes narrowed. "You're upset." "I'm fine, liar." He moved closer. "I've gotten good at reading you, Amara. And right now, you're radiating jealousy so loud I can hear it from across the room." She opened her mouth to deny it, closed it. There was no point lying to someone who saw through her so easily. "She was touching you," Amara heard herself say. "Sujin was all over you. And you let her." "Yes, I let her. Because telling her to step back would have caused a scene." He moved closer still. "But the entire time she was touching me, I was thinking about you. About the way you look when you're annoyed with me. About the way you bite your lower lip when you're thinking. About the fact that I've spent 2 weeks trying to give you space to heal, to adjust, to decide if you want what I'm beginning to realize I can't live without." "What's that?" she whispered. "You." His hand came up, cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "All of you. Every stubborn, beautiful, courageous part of you. I've tried to be patient, tried to let you come to me in your own time. But watching you walk away tonight because another woman touched me, seeing that fire in your eyes, that jealousy, it breaks something in me, breaks my control. Amara, say my name," she breathed. His name in her voice did something to him. She saw it in the way his jaw clenched, in the way his eyes went darker. Again. Minho. Something between them shifted, became inevitable. He leaned down. She rose up. Their mouths met halfway. The kiss was not gentle. It was weeks of restraint breaking. His hands in her hair, her hands fisting his shirt. The taste of him, mint and coffee and something uniquely him. The feel of his body against hers, solid and warm and real. They broke apart, breathing hard. Minho rested his forehead against hers. That was unprofessional. She managed. Very. He smiled against her mouth. Also inevitable. Also mine. You're mine, Amara. And I'm done pretending otherwise. Later that night, after the event ended, after he drove her home himself, rather than letting the security team do it, after he walked her to her door and kissed her again against the frame until she was breathless and dizzy and aching for more, he pulled back. "I should go." He said it like it hurt. "Before I do something neither of us is ready for." Amara caught his hand. "Stay." His control was visible. The war between what he wanted and what he thought was right playing across his features. "You're still healing. I don't care. You're under my protection. That means I don't take advantage. What if I want you to?" she heard herself say. "What if I've wanted you to since the moment I woke up in that hospital and saw you watching me like I was something precious?" His breath caught. "Amara, I need to hear you say it clearly. Say what you want. I want you." She pulled him inside, closed the door. "I want this. Want you. Want to stop pretending there's a world where we go back to being employer and employee. I want you to kiss me again. Want you to stay. Want." His mouth cut off the rest of her words. They moved through the apartment in a tangle of touches and breathless requests, and the kind of urgency that came from weeks of restraint finally breaking. He was careful of her shoulder, gentle where he needed to be, but there was nothing gentle about the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the way he breathed her name like a prayer and a curse. The fade to black came naturally, the bedroom door closing, the lamp turning off, the sound of her saying his name one more time before the world narrowed to just them, just this, just the feel of his skin against hers and the way he made her feel cherished and claimed and absolutely ruined for anyone else. The morning after arrived with soft light and the feeling of being watched. Amara woke slowly, awareness returning in pieces. Warm sheets, the ache in her shoulder dulled to almost nothing, the presence of someone else in her bed. Minho was propped on one elbow, fully awake, watching her with an expression that made her stomach flip. Morning. His voice was rough with sleep and something deeper. "How do you feel? Like I should regret last night," she said honestly. "But I don't." "Good. Because I plan on repeating it frequently." He leaned down, kissed her softly. "Starting now if you'll let me." She let him. They spent the morning in bed, talking between kisses, learning each other in daylight, building something that felt fragile and precious and worth protecting. "You have to understand," Minho said later, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "What we started last night, it changes things, makes you more visible, more vulnerable. My enemies will see you as a weakness now." "Let them," Amara said. "I stopped being invisible the moment I stepped between that knife and your son." He pulled her closer. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But I'm tired of living small, tired of making myself disappear. If being with you means being seen, maybe that's what I need." His kiss tasted like approval and possession. That afternoon, reality intruded. Jae-sung knocked on her door with news that made Minho's expression go cold. "There's been a development," he said in Korean, then switched to English for Amara's benefit. "The men from the alley, the ones who tried to kill the boy. We've identified them. They're working for someone new, someone who's been making moves against your territory." Minho stood, already shifting into the version of himself that ran an empire. "Who?" "Lee Jin-woo." Jae-sung said the name like it tasted bad. "He's consolidating power, taking over small operations, building toward something bigger, and he knows about her." His eyes flicked to Amara. "Knows she's under your protection." Minho's jaw clenched. "Increased security, double shifts on her building. I want eyes on her at all times. And find Jin-woo. I want to have a conversation about boundaries." After Jae-sung left, Minho turned to Amara. His expression was complicated, protective and possessive, and something that looked like fear wearing anger's face. "This is what I meant," he said quietly. "About you being vulnerable, about my world being dangerous. I understand. I don't think you do." He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. "Jin-woo isn't just another rival. He's ambitious, ruthless, the kind of man who doesn't care about collateral damage. If he sees you as a way to hurt me, and he will, he won't hesitate. Then we deal with it together." She came to stand beside him. "You taught me that I don't have to face things alone anymore. Remember? You said I was under your protection. That's a two-way street, Minho. Protecting you puts you in danger. Then we'll be in danger together." She took his hand, "Because I'm not going anywhere. And you're not pushing me away out of some misguided attempt to keep me safe. I've spent my whole life being kept safe, being told I couldn't handle things, being treated like I needed protection from reality. I'm done with that." His expression shifted, became something that looked like wonder mixed with fear. "You're extraordinary. You know that? I'm stubborn. Same thing." He pulled her against him. "Then we do this together. But you follow my lead on security. You trust my judgment on threats. And if I tell you to run, you run. Agreed?" "Agreed," she said. Then added, "But only if you promise not to do anything stupid and heroic that gets you killed. I don't make promises I can't keep. Then I don't agree to run." They stared at each other. The negotiation of two equally stubborn people trying to love each other without getting each other killed. Finally, Minho laughed. A real laugh that transformed his face. "You're going to drive me insane. That's the plan." Over the following weeks, the danger escalated. Small things at first, a car following too closely, a man loitering outside her building, messages left in places they shouldn't be. Minho's response was surgical. He moved with the kind of calculated violence that reminded Amara exactly what he was under the expensive suits and gentle touches. Jin-woo's operations started disappearing. His men ended up in hospitals or jail cells or simply gone. The message was clear. Touch what's mine and I will destroy you. But Jinwoo was either stupid or desperate. On a Tuesday evening in late November, everything went wrong. ***, batch, 2,000, 500 words. ***. Amara was leaving the office building when it happened. The security team was there, like always. Jae-sung walked 3 steps ahead, scanning the street. 2 other men flanked her. Standard protocol, safe. Except it wasn't safe at all. The van came out of nowhere, tires screaming against pavement. Doors flew open before it fully stopped. Men poured out, moving with military precision. Jae-sung went down first, a dart to his neck, his body crumpling. The other guards tried to react, but the attackers had planned for this. More darts, tranquilizers that worked fast. Amara ran, made it 10 feet before strong hands grabbed her from behind. She fought, used everything Minho had insisted she learn over the past weeks. Self-defense classes with instructors who didn't pull punches. She got 1 good hit in, felt someone's nose break under her elbow. Then something sharp pierced her neck. The world tilted. Her legs stopped working. She was being lifted, carried. The van's interior was dark and spinning. Voices spoke in Korean too fast for her fading consciousness to follow. The last thing she thought before darkness took her was Minho's name. Minho was in a meeting when his phone rang. He ignored it, called again, and again. The 4th time, he answered with barely controlled irritation. This better be important. Boss. It was Jae-sung, his voice thick and slurred. They took her. Jinwoo's men. They took Amara. The world stopped. Every sound in the conference room faded to white noise. Minho was moving before conscious thought caught up, phone still pressed to his ear. Where? How long ago? 10 minutes, maybe 15. We were hit with tranquilizers. By the time I came to, she was gone. We have traffic cameras tracking the van. Minho was already out the door, his voice dropping to something cold and lethal. Send me the location. Get every man we have on the street. I want eyes on every building Jinwoo owns or has ever looked at. And someone find me Jinwoo. Now. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, too impatient for the wait. His driver had the car running by the time he hit the street. The security team was already mobilizing, a small army appearing from nowhere, armed and ready. The phone rang again. Unknown number, Minho answered. I have something of yours. Jinwoo's voice was smooth, confident, the voice of a man who thought he'd already won. The woman, she's quite beautiful up close. I can see why you're so protective. Where is she? Not a question, a demand wrapped in barely restrained violence. Safe, for now. Jinwoo paused, letting the threat hang, but that could change quickly. I'm a reasonable man, Kang. I don't want war. I just want what's fair. Name your price. Everything. Jinwoo's laugh was cold. Your territory, your operations, your businesses, all of it. You have 24 hours to transfer everything into my name. After that, well, I'm sure you can imagine what happens to pretty things that stop being useful. The line went dead. Minho stared at his phone for 3 seconds that felt like centuries. Then he made a call. Gather everyone, he said to his second-in-command. Everyone who's ever owed me a favor, everyone who values their position in this city. We're going to war. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in controlled fury. Minho moved through his network like a storm system, calling in every debt, every alliance, every threat he'd been holding in reserve. Police who looked the other way, politicians who owed him their careers, businessmen who'd built empires on his foundations. By midnight, he'd assembled a force that made Jinwoo's operation look like children playing gangster. The tracking on the van led to an abandoned warehouse in Incheon. Too obvious, too easy. But Minho went anyway because he had no choice. Because Amara was there. Because the thought of her afraid, hurt, wondering if he'd come for her, was something he couldn't survive. The warehouse district was industrial silence and shadows. Minho's team surrounded the building. Infrared showed 7 heat signatures inside. One of them, smaller, female, sitting in what looked like a chair in the center of the main floor. He gave the signal. They moved. The assault was quick and brutal. Minho's men were trained, experienced, the kind of people who did violence for a living and did it well. Jinwoo's guards were decent, but decent wasn't enough against motivated professionals who knew their boss would accept nothing less than perfection. Minho went in last, after his team had secured the perimeter. He walked through the warehouse like death itself, past unconscious guards and the smell of gunpowder. And then he saw her. Amara sat tied to a chair under a single hanging light. Her face was bruised, her lips split. But her eyes, when they found his, were not filled with fear. They were filled with fury. "About time," she said, her voice rough. "I was starting to think you'd stopped for coffee." Relief hit him so hard he almost stumbled. He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands already working at the ropes. "Are you hurt?" "Besides my pride," she managed something like a smile. "They drugged me, tied me up, asked questions about you. I told them you were mediocre in bed and terrible with money, both lies." He got the ropes off, pulled her up, checked her for injuries with hands that shook despite his attempts at control. When he was satisfied she was mostly intact, he pulled her against him and just held her. "I thought I'd lost you." His voice broke on the words. "Thought I'd failed to protect you. Thought, you found me," she said simply. "You came for me, always." He pulled back to look at her. "Always, Amara. No matter what, no matter where. If someone takes you, I will burn the world down to get you back." "Jin-woo," she said. "He's not here. This was a distraction." "Smart girl." Minho's expression went cold. "He's waiting at his real location, waiting to see if I'd take the bait." He pulled out his phone. "But I don't need to be there personally to end him." He made a call, spoke rapid Korean, hung up. "Done. What's done?" Amara asked. "Justice," he said simply. "Jin-woo will be dead within the hour. Every operation he built will be dismantled by morning. His men will scatter or switch sides. And everyone in Seoul will know what happens when you touch what's mine." The ride back to the city was quiet. Amara leaned against him, exhausted and aching. Minho held her, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand tangled in hers. "I'm going to ask you something," he said quietly. "And I need you to answer honestly." She looked up at him. "This life, my world, the danger that comes with being close to me, can you live with it?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I've spent my whole life trying to be safe, trying to be invisible, trying not to take up too much space or ask for too much or want too much. And where did that get me? Alone in a foreign country, working 3 jobs, expired visa, no future." She shifted to look at him directly. "You make me visible, Minho. You make me feel like I matter, like I'm worth protecting, worth keeping, worth burning the world down for. So yes, I can live with the danger, because the alternative is living without you. And that's worse than any threat Jinwoo or anyone else could make." He kissed her, deep and claiming and desperate. The driver diplomatically raised the partition between front and back seats. When they finally broke apart, Minho rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Amara's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me." He said it again, clearer, more certain. "Not eventually, not someday. Now, as soon as possible. I want you protected by law. Want you carrying my name. Want the world to know that you're not just under my protection, you're my family." "That's insane. We've known each other for 2 months. I've known you for a lifetime," he said. "I knew you the moment you threw yourself between a knife and my son. Knew you when you looked at me in that hospital and didn't flinch. Knew you when you chose courage over safety every single time. 2 months or 2 years doesn't change what I know in my bones. You're mine, and I'm yours. So marry me. Let me make this official. Let me give you everything." She should say no, should be rational, should point out all the reasons this was moving too fast. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yes." His smile was like sunrise, like storm systems breaking, like every careful control he'd built around himself shattering into joy. "Yes, yes," she laughed. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll take your name. Yes, I'll be your family. Yes, to all of it." They were married 3 days later. Small ceremony at his home. Just his son, who hugged Amara so tight she could barely breathe. His ex-wife, who looked her up and down and said in careful English, "Take care of them both. They need you more than they know." Jae-sung and the security team, who'd become something like friends. A few close business associates. A judge who owed Minho favors. Amara wore a simple white dress. Minho wore a black suit. They exchanged vows in Korean and English. His son held the rings. When Minho kissed her, sealing the ceremony, the small gathering applauded, but she barely heard them. All she heard was his voice whispering against her mouth. "Mine, forever, yours," she whispered back, "forever." The following months were an education in what it meant to be Mrs. Kang Minho. There were galas where she wore dresses that cost more than her old yearly salary, business dinners where she learned to read the undercurrents of Korean corporate politics, charity events where she smiled and made small talk and represented his empire with grace she didn't know she possessed. But there were also quiet mornings with his son making breakfast, afternoons teaching English at a school Minho had funded at her request, evenings in their home, just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing. He was learning to let her in, to share the parts of himself he'd kept locked away. She learned about his childhood, about a father who'd been absent, a mother who died too young, about building an empire from nothing because he'd promised himself he'd never be powerless again. She told him about growing up in California, about feeling invisible, about coming to Korea looking for purpose and finding him instead. They learned each other, built something real underneath the intensity. 6 months after the wedding, Amara woke up nauseous. It took her 3 days to recognize the pattern. Another 2 to work up the courage to take the test. When the 2 pink lines appeared, she stared at them for a full minute. Then she laughed, cried, did both at once. Minho found her sitting on the bathroom floor, test in hand, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" He was on his knees beside her instantly. "Are you hurt? Did something happen?" "I'm pregnant." The words came out somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "We're having a baby." He went very still. Then he took the test from her hand, looked at it, looked at her. The expression on his face was something she'd never seen before. Wonder, joy, fear, all of it mixed together. "You're sure?" "I took 3 tests." She showed him the other positive results lined up on the counter. "We're having a baby." "Minho." He pulled her against him, buried his face in her neck, held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Which, she realized, to him she was. The pregnancy was easier than expected. Amara bloomed. Minho became even more protective. If that was possible, he attended every doctor's appointment, read every book, made lists of things they'd need. His son was ecstatic about becoming a big brother. He'd press his ear to her growing belly and tell the baby about dinosaurs and his school day and how much he'd loved her since she'd saved him. They found out they were having a girl. Minho cried when the ultrasound tech told them. Actually cried. Tears on his face, hand gripping Amara's so tight it almost hurt. "A daughter," he whispered. "We're having a daughter." They painted the nursery together. Soft yellows and whites. Minho insisted on doing it himself, wouldn't let his staff help, said it was important, that he needed to build this space for his daughter with his own hands. Amara watched him work, this dangerous man covered in paint, assembling furniture with the focused intensity he brought to everything, and felt her heart overflow with love. The baby came on a Tuesday morning in April. Amara's water broke during breakfast. Minho went pale, then shifted into crisis mode. He had her at the hospital in under 10 minutes, stayed with her through every contraction, let her grip his hand hard enough to leave marks, told her she was strong, told her she could do this, told her he loved her more than breathing. Their daughter was born at 3 in the afternoon, tiny and perfect and screaming her displeasure at the world. Minho held her with trembling hands, looked down at her like she'd hung the stars. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Just like her mother." "What should we name her?" Amara asked. They'd discussed options but never settled on one. Minho thought for a moment, then smiled. "Grace, because she's the grace I never deserved. Because you both saved me from becoming the monster I was afraid I'd be." "Grace it is," Amara said. "Grace Kang. Welcome to the world, baby girl." The following months were chaos and joy tangled together, sleepless nights, the particular exhaustion of new parents, learning to navigate life with an infant who seemed determined to never sleep, and a 6-year-old who wanted to help with everything. But also the sweetness. Watching Minho with their daughter, the way he'd hold her like she was made of glass, the way he'd sing to her in Korean, the way he'd look at Amara nursing, and his expression would go soft with something that looked like worship. His son was the best big brother. gentle and patient, and constantly telling his baby sister about everything. "Look, this is a dinosaur. Don't be scared. I'll protect you." Just like Mom protected me, Minho's business continued to expand, but he'd stepped back from the dangerous parts, handed those operations to people he trusted, said he had too much to lose now, said he wanted to be there for his children's childhoods, wanted to be the father he'd never had. Amara's teaching program grew. She opened 3 more schools, hired teachers, created curriculum, built something she was proud of that had nothing to do with being Mrs. Kang and everything to do with being herself. They found balance, built a life that felt real and earned. One evening, when Grace was 6 months old, asleep in her crib, his son staying at his mother's for the weekend, Amara and Minho sat on their balcony overlooking Seoul. The city glittered below them. The same city where she'd arrived broke and alone and desperate, where she'd stepped between a knife and a child and changed her life forever. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Meeting me, marrying me, all of it." Minho looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Never, not for a single second. Even with the danger, even with everything that's happened, especially because of all of it." He took her hand. "You saved my son. Then you saved me. Taught me that power isn't the same as strength, that building something is harder than destroying it, that being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. You made me better, made me want to be better. How could I regret the woman who gave me that?" She leaned against him, felt his arm come around her, felt safe and loved and seen. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," she admitted, "that I went from invisible to this, to you, to our family. You were never invisible." His voice was firm. "You were just surrounded by people who didn't know how to see you. I saw you from the first moment, and once I saw you, I couldn't look away." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd built something beautiful from danger and chance and the choice to be brave. Inside, their daughter made a small sound, not quite crying, just announcing her presence. They both stood automatically. Parents now, partners, forever. "Let me," Minho said. "You've been with her all day." He went inside. Amara heard his voice through the open door, speaking softly to Grace in Korean, telling her about her mother, about the night they'd met, about courage and love and the way life could change in a heartbeat. Amara touched her stomach, felt the flutter she'd been ignoring for weeks. Another life growing there, another chance to build something beautiful. She'd tell him tomorrow. Tonight, she'd just watch him with their daughter. Watch him be the man she'd known he could be from the moment their eyes met in that alley. The man who'd learned that the strongest thing you could do was love someone completely. She'd been wrong that first night. Wrong about dying. Wrong about endings. Because what she'd found with Minho wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning, the start of everything she hadn't known to hope for. And as souls sparkled below them and their family slept safe inside, Amara Wells, who'd become Amara Kang, who'd become a mother and a wife and a woman who'd learned to take up space in the world, smiled. She'd saved a child she didn't know. And in return, she'd been saved too. Not from danger, not from difficulty, but from the belief that she had to be invisible to survive. Minho had taught her that being seen could be terrifying and beautiful, that love was worth the risk. That family was something you built with your choices, not just your blood. That courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to act despite it. The next morning, over breakfast with Grace babbling in her high chair and Minho reading the news on his tablet, Amara cleared her throat. "I have something to tell you." He looked up. His expression went from casual to focused in a heartbeat. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She smiled. "Something's very right, actually. We're having another baby." The tablet clattered to the table. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You're pregnant? 3 months. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Minho was around the table in seconds, his hands on her face, his eyes searching hers. "Are you happy?" "Terrified and happy," she admitted. "We're going to have 3 kids, Minho. 3. That's a lot of chaos. Good thing we're good at chaos." He kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise. Then he dropped to his knees, put his hands on her stomach, spoke to the baby growing there in Korean, telling them they were already loved, already wanted, already his. Grace banged her hands on her high chair tray, demanding attention, not to be left out of whatever was making her parents emotional. Minho stood, picked up his daughter, pulled Amara close. The three of them stood there in the morning light, soon to be 5, a family built from chance and choice and courage. Years later, when people asked Amara how she'd met her husband, she'd smile, tell them it was complicated, that they'd met during a crisis, that she'd done something stupid and brave and it had changed everything. She wouldn't tell them about the knife, the blood, the weeks of danger, the way he'd looked at her like she was everything he'd been searching for without knowing he was searching. Some stories were too precious to share with strangers, but late at night, when the children were asleep and they had the quiet hours to themselves, Minho would pull her close, tell her he loved her, tell her she'd saved him, tell her he'd spend every remaining day of his life proving he was worthy of the courage she'd shown. And she'd tell him he didn't have to prove anything, that he'd already shown her what love looked like, that he'd taught her that being invisible was just another form of hiding, that being seen, really seen, by the right person was the most terrifying and beautiful thing in the world. They'd found each other in violence, built something in danger, but what they'd created was peace, was home, was everything neither of them had known to hope for until the moment their lives collided and something impossible awakened inside both of them. Love, real, messy, complicated, worth every risk. And that, Amara thought as she fell asleep in her husband's arms with their children safe down the hall and another life growing inside her, was the only ending that mattered. Not the danger they'd survived, not the obstacles they'd overcome, but the family they'd built, the love they'd chosen, the courage they'd found in each other. She'd protected a child she didn't know, and in return, she'd been given everything: a home, a family, a love that would last forever. The kind of love that burned away fear and built something beautiful from the ashes. The kind of love that made invisible women visible, that made dangerous men gentle, that made impossible things real. That was their story, and it was just beginning.